For much of the 20th century, the United States Marine Corps was defined by a single iconic mission: massive amphibious fleets gathering off hostile shores, backed by naval gunfire, and launching heavily armed troops onto contested beaches in landing craft, assault vehicles, and heavy helicopters. This concept of massed amphibious warfare against determined opposition defined marine operations from Iwo Jima to Incheon. Today, that playbook is fast becoming obsolete. In a conflict against a technologically capable peer adversary, concentrating large numbers of vulnerable transport ships near a defended coastline is a recipe for potential disaster. Modern anti-access and area denial weapons have transformed the Western Pacific into potentially the most dangerous maritime environments in world history, should a conflict break out. China, the other great power in the region, have spent 30 years building extensive arsenals designed specifically to keep sizable American forces thousands of kilometers away from the Asian mainland. Long-range anti-ship ballistic missiles, such as the DF-21D, the DF-26, and DF-17, can target large surface warships at enormous ranges. Supersonic and hypersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, such as the YJ-12 and YJ-18, can saturate fleet air defenses when launched in mass salvos from shore batteries, surface combatants, and bomber aircraft. Beneath the surface, modern smart naval mines and very quiet diesel-electric submarines present lethal hazards in littoral waters. Meanwhile, once marine forces land on a beach, precise long-range artillery and unmanned aerial vehicles can quickly decimate landing forces and destroy staging areas. The entire setup is intended to deter and to defeat any large-scale US response in the Western Pacific undertaken by conventional marine forces. Faced with these new realities, the United States Marine Corps has undertaken the most radical restructuring of its force posture in nearly a century. Recognizing that traditional large invasion fleets cannot really survive inside contested waters, the US Marines are abandoning the traditional model of massed opposed amphibious landings. Instead, they are adopting a strategy called Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, designed to fight inside the enemy's anti-access and area denial zone, rather than trying to assault it from the outside. Under Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, small, highly mobile marine detachments deploy rapidly to austere, remote islands and atolls across the Western Pacific. Operating as stand-in forces, these small units deliberately insert themselves deep inside contested territory prior to or at the outset of hostilities. Unlike traditional landing forces that seek to seize and hold territory, stand-in forces exist to conduct sea denial, maritime surveillance, and reconnaissance. They maintain a very low physical profile, electromagnetic, and acoustic signature, making them very difficult for adversary sensors to locate and target among the thousands of islands in the Pacific. By dispersing across strategic choke points, the Marines aim to turn the first island chain, a geographic arc stretching from Japan down through Taiwan and to the Philippines, into a dense mesh of hidden sensors and traps for opposing ships. The goal is simple: restrict the freedom of maneuver of enemy naval forces and shipping. By controlling key maritime passages such as the Bashi Channel and the Miyako Strait, hidden marine units can track adversary warships, feed targeting data to joint forces who can then strike at the ships, or to launch precision anti-ship missiles themselves. This challenges and hinders an enemy fleet and its support ships from breaking out into the open Pacific Ocean, effectively locking them inside their regional waters. To perform this strategy, the US Marine Corps created a new specialized unit, the Marine Littoral Regiment. Designed specifically for littoral warfare in archipelagic environments, a Marine Littoral Regiment is much smaller and lighter than traditional Marine regiments, numbering roughly 2,000 personnel. It is structured around three primary components: a littoral combat team, a littoral anti-air battalion, and a littoral logistics battalion. The littoral combat team serves as the primary offensive element. Built around an infantry battalion integrated with long-range anti-ship missile batteries, its main task is to operate dispersed missile positions and conduct sea denial. It also maintains surveillance of the surrounding area and identify the movements of enemy shipping for targeting by other US assets. The Littoral Anti-Air Battalion provides critical air defense, early warning, and denial of the airspace, protecting the regiment's scattered firing positions from adversary drone, missile, and aircraft attack. Finally, the Littoral Logistics Battalion manages the complex task of sustaining small, scattered units operating on isolated islands with limited infrastructure. The primary offensive weapon of the Marine Littoral Regiment is the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System. This system mounts a pair of naval strike missiles onto an unmanned, remotely operated Joint Light Tactical Vehicle chassis. The naval strike missile is a stealthy, high subsonic anti-ship missile with a range exceeding 185 kilometers. It flies low over the ocean to evade radar detection and uses an infrared seeker to identify and strike enemy surface vessels autonomously without emitting radar signals. Because the firing vehicle is unmanned, lightweight, and mobile, it can be rapidly transported by aircraft or landing craft. It can be fired from small clearings and relocated before enemy counter-battery fire can arrive. These mobile anti-ship batteries do not operate in isolation. They act as forward nodes in a vast multi-domain sensor network. Marine units track enemy shipping using target acquisition radars, electro-optical sensors, and unmanned aerial systems. They share this real-time data across a much wider digital network with United States Navy guided missile destroyers, attack submarines armed with cruise missiles, and of course American aircraft carriers deployed with Super Hornets and amphibious flattops deployed with the F-35B. As a result, a Marine unit on an isolated island can provide targeting data for general US Navy shooters and assets. For example, a missile launched from a submarine nearby or from carrier aircraft. The Marine forward bases are sensor nodes just as much as missile firing positions. The communication goes both ways as well. The Marines can receive targeting data supplied by a distant naval vessel of the US Navy and use that to guide the naval strike missile. Transporting and sustaining these small dispersed Marine units across thousands of kilometers of ocean requires a fundamental shift in naval fleet structure. Historically, the United States Navy relied almost exclusively on large, expensive, amphibious warfare ships, such as the 45,000-ton America-class amphibious assault ship and the 25,000-ton San Antonio-class amphibious transport dock. While these large ships remain essential for carrying heavy equipment and serving as aviation hubs, their high cost and large physical profile and signatures make them distinct high-value targets inside contested waters. To complement these major surface vessels, the military is procuring a new fleet of medium landing ships known as the McClung class. The medium landing ship is a smaller vessel, roughly 100 meters long, designed to move small marine units and their equipment directly onto uncontested shores without needing significant port infrastructure. These ships feature a shallow draft and beaching capability, allowing them to unload equipment onto remote shores and depart quickly. By distributing forces across dozens of medium landing ships and small landing craft, rather than concentrating them on a few large amphibious assault ships, the fleet reduces overall risk and increases operational flexibility. Founding and equipping this radical new strategy required drastic choices. Through an overarching Marine Force modernization effort named Force Design, the Marine Corps deliberately shared major heavy armored combat capabilities that had been central to its mission for decades. The Marines completely divested all of their M1A1 Abrams main battle tanks, disbanding armored units and transferring all of their heavy tanks to the United States Army. Heavy main battle tanks were deemed too heavy to transport rapidly across island chains, too dependent on massive fuel supply lines, and largely ineffective in island terrain. The Marines also significantly reduced their inventory of traditional towed tube artillery, cutting multiple batteries of M777 155mm howitzers. In their place, the service invested heavily in mobile rocket artillery, specifically the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, better known as HIMARS, capable of firing long-range precision munitions like the Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System, the Precision Strike Missile, and the ATACMS. Additionally, the Marine Corps reduced the overall number of conventional infantry battalions and scaled back heavy transport helicopter squadrons, such as those flying the CH-53E Super Stallion, shifting resources toward unmanned reconnaissance systems, loitering munitions, and electronic warfare assets. While this new strategy offers a coherent answer to anti-access weapons, it introduces significant operational risk and disadvantages. The most serious concern is the vulnerability and potential isolation of Marine units deployed deep inside enemy anti-access and area denial zones. Small, island-bound missile teams are geographically constrained once ashore. While their vehicles are mobile on land, an island imposes hard boundaries. Once an adversary identifies the presence of a Marine unit on an island, that position may well become a static, high-priority target. In a high-intensity conflict, an adversary could employ massed missile strikes, air bombardments, and naval blockades to isolate these island outposts. Because these stand-in forces operate close to the enemy mainland and far ahead of the main body of the US fleet, they risk being surrounded, cut off, and destroyed piecemeal. If an adversary chooses simply to bypass an island outpost, the Marines stationed there could find themselves trapped on a piece of land with no enemy ships passing within range of their short-range missiles, effectively neutralizing them without a direct fight. A closely related vulnerability is the immense challenge of resupply and logistics. Operating across thousands of square kilometers of open ocean presents a daunting logistical bottleneck. A single anti-ship missile launcher battery, or HIMARS battery, requires a significant number of heavy precision munitions to remain effective. Moving heavy naval strike missiles, rocket pods, vehicle fuel, and spare parts to remote islands against dense adversary submarine, air, and missile threats is extraordinarily difficult. The same goes for resupplying the Marine personnel themselves with food, fresh water, and medical supplies. And if the opponent chooses to invest in the naval blockade of the island occupied by the Marines, relieving the position will be extremely difficult. If the opponent, for example China, establish firm air and naval superiority over the first island chain, sustaining dispersed Marine units becomes almost impossible. Defense analysts have pointed out a grim historical parallel. During the Pacific War, tens of thousands of Imperial Japanese Army troops occupying remote Pacific islands were systematically cut off from resupply by US Navy blockades and air power. Starved of food, ammunition, and medical supplies, these isolated garrisons were effectively bypassed and left to perish on remote outposts. In many cases, where US forces chose to attack these islands, the Japanese garrisons were systematically destroyed, although not before inflicting heavy losses on the Americans. The danger is that modern US Marines operating from isolated island bases within China's area denial zone risk facing similar logistical isolation and potential destruction in a prolonged naval conflict. Beyond tactical risk in the Pacific, there are serious concerns regarding single-scenario optimization. Basically, the Marine units are being trained and equipped for a single type of combat scenario. By divesting main battle tanks, reducing tube artillery, and restructuring infantry units specifically for island operations and sea denial, the Marine Corps may be sacrificing its versatility as a global crisis response force. If the Marines are called upon to fight in heavy land conflicts, such as urban operations in Eastern Europe, or high-intensity ground warfare in the Middle East, they will lack the heavy armor and heavy artillery fire support required to survive against conventional opponents in these regions. Critics argue that the Marine Service is tailoring its entire force structure for a single specific geographic scenario at the expense of its historic role as a versatile, heavy amphibious force capable of operating anywhere in the world. Despite these risks, US military leadership in the Pentagon views the strategic pivot as an unavoidable necessity. The rapid proliferation of precision-guided weapons and anti-ship ballistic missiles made the traditional doctrine of massed amphibious assaults obsolete, at least in the Western Pacific. Continuing to rely on large, concentrated landing fleets inside the range of modern anti-ship missiles exposed thousands of sailors and Marines to unacceptable risk. By transforming the Marine Corps into an agile, dispersed, and stealthy sea denial force, the military aims to turn an adversary's regional anti-access strategy against itself. Therefore, the US Marine Corps has traded its heavy armor and massive invasion fleets for speed and long-range precision fires, equipping these forces with the Naval Strike Missile, light landing vehicles, expendable medium landing ships, and advanced multi-domain sensor networks provides a coherent counter to conventional naval power. However, this strategy relies heavily on the ability to survive inside contested zones and maintain supply lines under the superiority of the opposing force. Whether these small stand-in forces can remain viable and sustained on isolated Pacific islands in a peer conflict remains one of the most critical questions facing American military planners.